Brian Callahan and Raheem Morris, two of the finalists for the Indianapolis Colts head coaching job. So, in your guys' opinion, which one should the Colts hire to be their next head coach? Well, Drake and I are going to talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined here by my colleague and fellow writer at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, we're entering the fifth week of the Colts head coaching search. I feel like I am continually just counting down the weeks, but hey, I genuinely feel like we're close. It's got to be either this week or next week, right? It can't go much farther than that, right? Right?
Well, that's really what you thought. You thought we were like, oh, we're gonna hear a head coach here in the next week, and we said that a week ago, and probably not even going to happen this week. Maybe, probably. Who knows at this point? Maybe there's a fourth round during the combine. So I don't really know, but I'm ready. I'm ready for a head coach. I right there with everybody else.
Yeah, I think we all are at this point, where everyone has talked about every single candidate. We're just ready for a decision. So I know all of Colts fans are talking about it. And Josh, good to see you, man. Are these the two finalists? They're two of the finalists. There are still more that the Colts are considering, but I think it's gonna be these two are definitely the favorites, I would say, heading into this final coaching search. We've got a ton of people already in the comments. Nathan, I see you talking about Gus Bradley and the pick that the Colts got from the Bills. We're going to talk about that later in the episode. Christian saying if they do three finalists, it should be Steichen, Callahan, and Morris in that order. So I'm pretty sure that those are going to be some of the finalists. Wyatt Law talking also about the draft pick. Like we're going to talk about that later on. And now we got Chasing Larger Sports Stories podcast with Callahan or Steichen. So it looks like we were already getting people wondering which side are we going to be on. And then our third host here, Stats Matt. Colts are keeping this tight-lipped as I've ever seen. And yes, you are correct about that. So we're already having a ton of people in here. So if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on all the things, every single one of them. Go ahead and like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Go ahead and follow Colts at Colts on FN on Twitter, and then subscribe to the YouTube. Hit that bell so you know whenever we're going live, and give the episode a like. We always appreciate that as well. So, and then we've got Peyton. Who do you think is most likely to get the job in order? Morris, Callahan, or Steichen? Well, we're going to talk about two of those guys tonight. So tonight's episode is going to be a little bit different. So we're going to kind of do a little debate here on the Horseshoe Huddle podcast. We're going to see myself, as you guys all know, myself on the Brian Callahan train. I have been for weeks now. And then we're going to have Drake kind of be on the side of Raheem Morris. So we're each going to give the pros and cons of each. And we'll see if we can convince some of you guys or maybe sway you guys one way or another. Let us know in the chat what you guys are thinking about each candidate. But for tonight, we're going to focus on Brian Callahan, the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals, and Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. And as Stats Matt says, I'm waiting for them to hire a guy that was never reported as interviewing at this point. Yeah. You know what? Hey, my jaw would be on the floor the same way as it was when Jeff Saturday was announced as the hire. And then, hey, here's Stats Matt should have gotten a third host tonight, buddy. You are the third host, bud. Just remember that. Rich Wheeler, day 29. Keep it going, guys. This wait will be over soon. And then we can all speculate on quarterbacks for 70 days. And that's right. That's exactly what we will all do. But hey, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about Brian Callahan first here. Like I said, I'm on the Brian Callahan train. I've been clamoring for this for weeks now, that the Colts need to pull the trigger and make Brian Callahan the next head coach of the Colts. And for me, I think it's an obvious decision. So guys, hear me out. Let me know what you think. He's got plenty of coaching experience in the NFL, 13 years worth. He's the son of a coach. Bill Callahan has been one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL for some time. He was a head coach in this league. He actually led the then Oakland Raiders to the Super Bowl back in 2002 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But one thing that's really impressed me about Brian Callahan all along is he really hasn't used his father to further his career, and I really respect that, because a lot of people might say, "Hey, my dad's a coach. I can just kind of hang on to his coattails and it'll get me places." Brian Callahan has kind of separated himself from his father, Bill, the whole time. And I really respect that. And it seems like everywhere he goes, he has success with the quarterback that he's with. Let's start with Peyton Manning there in Denver with the Denver Broncos. Was there with Peyton when the Broncos won that Super Bowl in 2015. After that, he goes on to the Detroit Lions. It goes with Matthew Stafford and helps Matthew Stafford have some of the best years of his career. Let's move it along to another quarterback, Derek Carr, who at the time when Brian Callahan was with Derek Carr, Carr had his best season in terms of completion percentage and yards in his career. And then after that, he was hired as the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals, where he is today. And he's taken that team and that offense to new heights while developing a young quarterback in Joe Burrow. And then that's kind of where we stand with all this. So before I talk on for 10 minutes, Drake, give me some of your maybe some of your questions or concerns with Brian Callahan that you might have. And let me see if I can kind of help those and maybe calm you down a little bit.
Yeah, I like to think of this much more as it's not like a debate where I'm like, all right, listen here, you POS. It's more of a, because it's very hard for me to try to poke holes in an argument that
Mm-hmm.
Brian Callahan should not be the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. But if we're trying to compare him with Morris, and if we're trying to state some concerns, if we have to find them, he's never head coached in the NFL. He's never led his own team in any capacity. He likely, and I do say likely because perhaps Andrew might be able to help me out with this. I tried to find it, but I couldn't. But he likely wasn't getting his hands on with the game plans until Detroit in 2016, like seriously concocting, putting things together. Now, yes, the Broncos were a winner and the Bengals are. There's no denying. Okay. Joe Burrow, you can really attribute Brian Callahan saying, hey, look, this is your team and I'm going to play to your strengths. That is a perfect coach. But outside of that, those Lions in 16 and 17 and the Raiders, they really didn't have that great of a record. The Lions were 9-7 both years. The Raiders were 4-12, last in their division. And he's been very recently calling the plays for 4 years of his career. But again, that's all I could find that I could poke holes in with Brian Callahan. Great candidate, but that's what I would say would concern me.
So when he was in Denver, he was more of an offensive quality control coach. So yeah, he probably didn't have as big of a say in the game plan. But one thing he did have a say on, and one person that put a lot of trust in him, was Peyton Manning. And Peyton Manning just doesn't do that to anybody. Now I know, and I've been getting all these every time I mention Brian Callahan and how he has Peyton Manning's support. You always have that person on Twitter that says, "Well, Peyton recommended Adam Gase before that."
Oh, come on.
I don't think these two are really correlated at all. When you talk about how Peyton recommended Adam Gase. Adam Gase went on, and outside of the time that Gase had with Manning, Gase didn't do anything, whether it was an offensive coordinator or a head coach, anything. The only time that Gase had success was with Peyton Manning. Brian Callahan has had success with other quarterbacks every stop he's gone outside of Peyton Manning. And I think that really has shown something there. I also think that you talked about Callahan calling plays. He actually doesn't call the plays in Cincinnati. And I know, again, that's something that a lot of people might say, whoa, that gives me pause. Well, Nick Sirianni didn't call the plays in Indy, and he doesn't call the plays in Philadelphia now. Nick Sirianni's a pretty damn good head coach. You don't have to call the plays necessarily to be a big part of to be a successful offensive coach. And Brian Callahan has actually a lot of responsibilities as the offensive coordinator with the Cincinnati Bengals. He started out with being on Zach Taylor's staff, and he's a guy that Zach Taylor really deviates and gives a lot of responsibility to, in order to, so that way Zach Taylor can handle a lot of the head coaching duties. He's heavily involved in the game plan. Although the red zone game planning is Brian Callahan. He's a guy that works together with, it was then wide receiver coach Troy Walters with the Bengals, on trying to get the wide receivers in the best spot possible for them. He works with Zach Taylor on implementing what the offense and what the game plan should be on the base down. Zach Taylor handles more of the third down situations, but as far as red zone and the base downs, a lot of that is Brian Callahan. So while he may not be calling the plays on the sidelines, he is the one that's getting this team ready throughout the week. And I think it really shows on Sunday, especially when you see how wide open these wide receivers and running backs, tight ends are in this Bengals offense. And while Joe Burrow is a phenomenal quarterback, easily top 3 quarterback in the NFL right now, in my opinion, in Joe Burrow, it makes his life so much easier when you can get those guys wide open and get your weapons in a position where they can go out and be successful in whatever facet of that offense that may be.
And I agree with all that stuff. If there's anything that I could say about just at this point, it's that we'll put the scenario in what he's gonna inherit. Let's say hypothetically he gets put with the Colts. With a struggling team, he put Carr very high up with his stats, but they were only 4-12. The Colts do have a similarly bad offensive line situation, kind of similar to the Bengals, but outside of that, you've got a far superior receiver group. You've got perhaps an even more reliable tight end than a rookie in Woods with Hurst. You've got, a running back kind of similar to Jonathan Taylor. I don't think he's as good, but in Joe Mixon. And then you've got Joey B, and you're able to just take an offense and throw it around him. It's going to be drastically different in Indianapolis. He's going to be getting a rookie. He's going to potentially be getting, a team that is going to have to, again, realign themselves with a brand new signal caller. So it's going to be an uphill climb. My only concern with him is that as far as, the head coaching experience, I really do think it would help. I think it would also help if he didn't have to take such a drastic dive in talent and maybe such an awful year before. I mean, these guys were almost in the Super Bowl. So definitely great points. I think though, I have to say this is not a hardcore debate. Brian Callahan is fantastic. I think he'd be a fantastic coach. I was forced by Andrew to poke holes at him. Okay. but those would be my concerns if I had to find
those are valid concerns though, because when you look at that Bengals offense, they are stacked full of talent. I talked about Burrow and Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. You mentioned Joe Mixon. They've had Hayden Hurst this year, but I think when you look at the Colts, these things could be, with the right development, they could unlock similar qualities. I mean, we already talked about Jonathan Taylor, who I would take Jonathan Taylor over Joe Mixon any day of the week. I think that Michael Pittman Jr. is comparable to T. Higgins. I think Jelani Woods has great potential. We saw what Alec Pierce, some flashes of what he can do. So there is talent on this Colts roster on the offensive side. It's just all about unlocking. And then I want to give a shout out to let me see here. Kelsey Conway of the Cincinnati Enquirer. She wrote an article about a couple months ago and really went in depth on what Callahan does. So I wanted to kind of just give her some props on this for really doing a deep dive. And it says that Callahan sets the passing plays for the base downs. He meets with Taylor and they put together that cohesive game plan. He also puts together the protection plan each week and then presents to the coaches and players. Then he goes on to red zone, and then at the end of the week he meets with Taylor to help script the opening play. So he has a lot of responsibility on offense. And what sticks out to me, and this is something that I've harped on from the very beginning, Brian Callahan is a player's coach. He really is. When he was asked by Tom Pelissero why he got into coaching, it was all about, I like seeing the players succeed, and I love putting the players in the best position to succeed. Hayden Hurst, the tight end for the Bengals, is on the record that Callahan comes to him and comes to the other wide receivers or running back and say, hey, what routes do you like to run, or what routes do you think are best for you in these certain situations? And Hurst said then later in the week they'll see what the red zone game plan or what some other part of the game plan is, and you see those routes incorporated in that. He trusts his players. He trusts the players know what they do best, and he looks to exploit that in his game plan. So it's very fascinating, and I just think everything with surrounding what Brian Callahan has done, combined with the fact that Peyton Manning is so high on Brian Callahan, and we know Jim Irsay loves Peyton Manning like a son, and his opinion is going to speak volumes with Jim Irsay, that I think that Brian Callahan right now should probably be considered the favorite to land this head coaching job. But enough of us talking. Let's get to the stars of this program, the chat. Logan Schmidt saying Irsay saw Peyton on the sideline yesterday and offered him a contract in the Pro Bowl. Love that. Love that. Matthew says, are we waiting until after the Super Bowl? I hope not. I hope we get an announcement this week.
Really hope it happens sooner than that.
But if it's Shane Steichen, definitely. If it's one of the others, it can happen this week, but I'm not going to rule out it going past the Super Bowl. So Unboxing Mania says, yes, I like Callahan a lot. That would be not my number one choice. Looks like we're on the same one. Nomadic Brian says, I vote for Raheem Callahan or Brian Morse. So, hey, it looks like you're fine with both of them or any combination of the two. Yeah. Tez, long time no see. What's up? Hope you're doing well. Nathan has said he's been on the Morse train since day one. So hopefully I swayed you the other way, Nathan. Matt Roberts says at the start of the offseason, I would prefer an offensive mind like Johnson, Callahan, or Steichen. But the more I learn about Morse, the more I really want him. So yeah, it could definitely be something to say about Morris, and we're about to really get into that. Stats Matt said compared to Morris's known staff connections are lesser known, and we're going to talk. I didn't really talk about his staff connections, but I do want to talk about some of Morris's staff connections when we do get into him. And honestly, yeah, let's kind of move into that. That area, Raheem Morse. We a lot has been said about his staff connections, and a lot has been talked about him as a man and what he has gone through. So Drake, go ahead and give your case for Raheem Morris here and why you think he should be the next head coach for the Indianapolis Colts.
Well, if you're talking about experience, you really don't have to look much further than Raheem Morris. He's literally been in the league for exactly 20 years. Including a 10-6 season, head coaching a very flaky Bucs team. And I've said this again, look up Josh Freeman and you will see he was out of the NFL by 2015. Just wasn't really cut out to be a starting quarterback, and Morris somehow got that guy to a 10-6 record. But I'm just going to run down as fast as possible without sounding ridiculous, the list of this guy, of what this guy's done. Defensive quality control in Tampa for the 2002 Super Bowl champions, defensive assistant in Tampa the next year, assistant and head defensive secondary and backs coach in Tampa for 4 years, and then the Commanders from 2012 to 2015. He was the head coach of the Buccaneers at age 33 in 2009, which was completely ridiculous. That was not happening. Trust me, when I say no one else had that kind of a young head coach. He was also an interim coach in Atlanta when Dan Quinn got canned in 2020. He's been an assistant head coach, defensive pass coordinator, wide receivers coach, pass game coordinator, and defensive coordinator for the Falcons for 5 years, and currently is the defensive coordinator for the LA Rams, which they won a Super Bowl last year, of course. That is 2 Super Bowl teams this guy's been a part of. Now, Callahan's been a part of one as well, but he has been right at the helm of these game plans for these Super Bowl teams. I mean, outside of defensive quality control, of course, but he elevated a lot of those teams, and he was an unbridled young, didn't really, probably a little cocky that he had the job at such a young age. This is a different Raheem Morris. This is a guy who's built the connections in the NFL. And real quick about those, the Colts currently have locked Gus Bradley, so he's going nowhere. But he likes Gus Bradley, and he probably would have kept him anyway. But if you're talking about offensive coordinators, let's talk about 49ers pass game coordinator Bobby Slowick. He coached 3 quarterbacks. All right, 3 quarterbacks, almost got to a Super Bowl. One of those is Mr. Irrelevant, by the way. And then the LA Rams pass game coordinator on staff with Morris was Zach Robinson. He coached Stafford during the run, and he coached Baker Mayfield to at least a couple of decent clips when that guy really went over to the Rams not knowing what the hell he was doing. So you look at a guy, he's got the experience, he's got the know-how, he's been working. I think, Andrew, you even said he's been working for this opportunity for another 13 years. It's right in front of him. And you talk about staff and experience and knowledge and just what he's done. He's literally been in damn near every position that you can possibly be in. I think he'd be perfect.
And again, you said it earlier. I think Raheem Morris is a great candidate. I think he's a great man. Players absolutely respect him. They love playing for him, and he really has been working towards that second shot. The thing that worries me, and yes, we've touched on him being a coach on the offensive side of the ball, but it was just as that wide receivers coach in Atlanta. Most of the rest of his time has been on the defensive side of the ball, and just the way that the NFL is trending, it makes it tough for defensive head coaches to really be successful in this league unless they have, like you said, a rock star staff there to develop a young QB. My biggest worry is, yes, we talk about the staff that that Raheem Morris can bring in right now, but what happens when that offensive coordinator goes and gets a head coaching job? Then the offensive coordinator after that goes and gets a head coaching job. Eventually, that's going to catch up to you where you're constantly having to change offensive coordinators, constantly changing systems, constantly having new coaches come in to help that quarterback instead of having that top guy there with the quarterback all the time. And that's what gives me pause about Raheem Morris, is because we even saw it this year to an extent with in Buffalo, where Sean McDermott has with Josh Allen. Josh Allen, I mean, he had a hell of a year. And I don't want to discredit Josh Allen because I think he's up there with Burrow and Mahomes as the best quarterbacks in the game right now. But we saw how Josh Allen became, we saw the turnovers start to rear their ugly head again when with Josh Allen under Ken Dorsey, where we didn't necessarily see that when Brian Dable was there as the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. Now you see Brian Dable go to the New York Giants, and then he takes away those turnovers that have plagued Daniel Jones for most of his career. So that's the thing. You can have a great staff to start, but it's about keeping that staff. And when there's constant turnover, that just makes me a little worried that that could happen here in Indianapolis. If the Colts get a young quarterback and he starts having success, Raheem Morris's connections eventually will run out. And that's what kind of gives me some pause about leaning defensive when the NFL in general is just going so offensive at the moment.
Well, and that those are legitimate concerns because, kind of like you mentioned, nowadays, if you do have a defensive minded coach and you keep on churning through all of those offensive coordinators, you're going to have to keep adjusting to their game plans and stuff. I personally feel like Morris has been breeding him or has been grooming himself for this. I think he completely understands that. I don't think that a guy of his experience and his know-how in the league, even being a head coach, I don't know how he wouldn't go into that thinking, what happens if I hire Slowick and he's outstanding and in 2 years he's gone. He knows this, he understands this, he knows exactly what he's getting himself into. So very, very, I'm the kind of guy that I'll say those are very, very real and fair arguments and concerns because, yeah, if you keep on churning out offensive coordinators, perhaps I'm wrong. And no matter how much you think you're ready, how ready are you really for that much talent if you can just keep on sending them away and then you got to play them later on potentially as a head coach? So I do personally feel like he would handle it, but I also think that those are very legitimate concerns for Morris.
We love Rich Wheeler. He's one of our loyal listeners, saying you guys are killing it, like one of the presidential TV debates, but you're rooting for both guys. Love to hear that. Glad you enjoyed the episode, Rich. But yeah, let's dive
awesome.
into some of these comments here. And again, I gotta go way back here.
There's a lot.
Yeah, there definitely is
Wow.
here. So Steve said, sorry, just popped on, but saw today the Colts are preventing Bradley from interviewing. Bad idea, in my opinion. Forcing a DC on a new head coach seems like it would dissuade many candidates. And we're going to hold off on that comment, Steve, because we're going to talk about Bradley later in the show. And I do want to touch on that and kind of give some backstory and maybe some context as to why the Colts are blocking Bradley from interviewing for defensive coordinator positions elsewhere, and why it might not be as big a deal as what people think. So Alan saying that Callahan will be the next coach. So we'll see there. And then Stats Matt always has to bring Jeff Saturday to the mix. Saw a tweet that he said on JMV that Saturday was told over a week ago that he wasn't going to be the head coach. I haven't heard anything on that, but if that is true, and Zach Kiefer is a guy that I trust completely. I mean, thank goodness. I think we're all happy about
Can
that
I
one.
can I actually say something real quick about Jeff Saturday? The only reason that he is still getting talked about is because of the Colts fans.
Yes, I mean,
I
at
really
this
think the
point,
Colts
it
fans are
could
still
be.
scared, so they're churning his name out there. I think this is personal opinion only. Who knows with her say? Again, it happened, but I'm
Mhm.
telling you, in my humble opinion, I think he has been off the radar for 2-3 weeks at this point. I think it was pretty soon.
I would agree. Nomadic Bryant says Morris took over problems at head coach a couple times. This go around will be starting with a long-term plan and much better situation, and that's very true. In Tampa Bay, they went 10-6 in the second season. Things started to kind of fall off after that, and he was fired right away. So I do think he was young, like Drake had said. So he has been building up for this, and he's done it before. So he knows kind of what to expect going in. And Drake, you made Steve a believer. He said he'll take Morris. So good job there
Thank you, Steve.
on that. He's Quentin says I have Morris and Callahan tied for one. Morris because of his connections, and Callahan because of the way he made the offense work, even with a beat up offensive line and the way he helped develop Burrow. And that's the thing. We're talking about these candidates and trying to poke holes in them, but I think both would be very good hires for the Indianapolis Colts. And Jerry says has a kind of saying a bad argument here. Offensive coordinators leaving. You could say the same about defensive coordinators leaving. I don't think that's a bad argument because you can replace defensive coordinators a lot easier with than you can great offensive coordinators with the way the league is going right now, and defensive coordinators aren't leaving at such a high rate as offensive coordinators for head coaching positions.
You'll see a lot more offensive-minded head coaches as the league churns on year after year.
Exactly. I mean, the Colts had a very good defense under Gus Bradley until the end of the year when they were just completely gassed. And yes, the Colts are blocking Gus Bradley from interviewing for other defensive coordinator positions, but if it was for a head coaching position, the Colts would not be blocking that. And Gus Bradley has gotten 0 requests to be a head coach in this league. So it's a lot easier to replace a defensive coordinator than it is a great offensive coordinator. Stats Matt says, I think Morris kind of has his own offense. That would be interesting to see whether he would be able to implement that into the system. And then maybe losing staff over the years on the offensive side of the ball wouldn't be as big of a detriment to this team if that's the case. But still, it does worry me that he only has a few years as a coach, and I'm sure he knows offensive ball. All of these coaches in the NFL know both sides of the ball. That's what
you
makes
won't win
them
if you don't.
coaches. Exactly. But what you just feel more comfortable when you're bringing in a new quarterback, a rookie quarterback that is going to be, you hope, the face of your franchise for the next 15 years. You want it to be an offensive-minded guy. Those are the ones that we have seen that have had the most success in recent years. I mean, look at our own division. Look what happened to Jacksonville. Urban Meyer gets out of there. They get that bad coaching staff. In comes Doug Peterson, an offensive-minded head coach, great with young quarterbacks, a great builder of young quarterbacks. And Trevor Lawrence looks like he is going to be the Trevor Lawrence that we thought he was going to be coming out of college, which is a bad thing for the Colts. Wyatt says, agree with you, Andrew. Callahan or Steichen would provide better continuity for developing the young quarterback. Stats Matt says the debate is too nice. Let's get something cutthroat. But I mean, I wish I could.
It's hard. If my favorite was Bieniemy, this would be way easier for Andrew.
Yeah. If it was Bieniemy, oh boy, we'd be getting. I'd be going cutthroat. Now, Nomadic Bryant has this. What is this Las Vegas having Wink Martindale as the favorite for the head coach? And I know, Drake, you saw this weekend, as did I. Again, I think it's because, number one, not even Vegas. Nobody knows what the Colts are going to do. They've been, like Stats Matt said earlier, they've been very tight-lipped about this entire process. nothing is getting out. I mean, yes, you've heard that Brian Callahan, Raheem Morris have had great interviews. Aaron Glenn had a great second interview. You heard people. Wink Martindale said that he had a nice second interview, which is why Vegas might think that he's the favorite. But it's because there's really, it's anybody's guess who's going to get this. And honestly, credit the Indianapolis Colts and credit the candidates of that the Colts are interviewing for keeping things tight-lipped as well, because leaks don't lead to anything. Yes, we'd like to know what's going on in the situation, but in the grand scheme of things, leaks just make it a bigger distraction. So credit Chris Ballard, Jim Irsay, Carly Irsay, and everybody involved with those interviews for keeping it in house. So, but hey, you guys, let us know what you think. If you're not watching live, leave a comment down below to see which would you prefer, Callahan or Morris, or if you think both are home runs. Because I think Drake and I have both communicated, while each one has their holes, I think the Colts would be just fine with either one of them. Personally, I'm hoping it's Brian Callahan. I know Drake is kind of leaning Raheem Morris, so hey, we'll see who's right in the end. But I think either, if the Colts end up with either one of those, I would sleep well at night knowing that the Colts have an adult in the room and have a very good candidate as their head coach moving forward. You like what I did there, Drake?
That was pretty good.
Right. But and then StatsBat said Vegas had that because the New York beat reporter talking about Wink Martindale and his interview. Logan Schmidt said I'm okay with any of the three. I assume he's talking about Shane Steichen as well, and I think we're all in that boat. So great discussion tonight. Let's move it along to some of the latest Colts news and rumors going around, because hey, it was the weekend. There was, of course, a lot of that happening. So let's start with the first one here. So Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated gave some insight into what is going on with these Colts interviews, and kind of what the process has been. So we told you guys how those first Zoom interviews were more about 4 hours long, and that included Chris Ballard and Carly Ursay Gordon, Jim's daughter. What that has been, it's come out that those were more of preliminary interviews, just kind of seeing who the best candidates would be. And really the second round that we've been talking about, that is the first actual interviews where the Colts have limited it down to 7 or 8 different candidates. And those are the very long, drawn out interviews. They've lasted 12 hours long. The Colts have either been to the facility, or in Steichen's case, they flew out to Philadelphia, and they've met with various different groups. They've spent considerable amount of time one-on-one with Jim Irsay. Every single candidate has. One of the people that is in the know about this have said it's been about 30% football, 30% talking about what they would do as far as a leader and in a leadership capacity, and then the other 40% talking about different things that they would do around the facility, their different philosophies, things like that. So that was interesting to hear, and really kind of cool, as we were finally able to get some insight into what's going on behind the scenes with these Colts interviews.
Well, and I'm sure that many people know this, but head coach goes, like you said, it's 30, 30, 40. Okay. It goes far past just what you're doing on the field. It goes they're going to ask you, what are you doing in your free time? They're going to ask you, how do you typically spend your weekends? How do you spend your bye week? What are you doing with the players during bye week? I mean, they want to uncover, they're not going to leave any stone unturned. And I actually wanted to address the Vegas. They are following headlines. I guarantee you, when Aaron Glenn got his second interview, his odds shot up. Wink Martindale got his second interview, his odds shot up. But Jeff Saturday, he was number one the whole time because they knew he was going to get a second interview. Okay, so ignore that. The Colts have literally, like Andrew said, they have kept this so bank vault tight that it's quite impressive, because none of us know what in the heck is even going on. But they've combed through these candidates very well, and you're just hoping the third interview is more like a give me your final statement on why you should take over as the head coach for the Indianapolis Colts.
I like this from Nomadic Brian. Survivor Colts head coach edition. That's a great title.
It's a Hard Knocks episode,
right? It really could be. And Stats. This is kind of what I was alluding to. StatsBat said McAfee and Pagano brought this up. Pagano got Irsay to upgrade a lot of the facility. We have to realize this as well. This isn't just the Colts interviewing the candidates. Us with a lot of us with just regular jobs, we're always used to going in and interviewing and trying to sell ourselves. But in the NFL, it's a little bit different. the Colts have to sell themselves to the candidates as well, especially because of what has happened, what has transpired over the past 6 to 8 months, where the Colts were projected to be a division winner and completely collapsed. Ursay getting involved, overstepping his boundaries. A lot of these guys want to know what went wrong. And then the Colts want to know what they would do to help fix that, or what their opinion from the outside looking in on this roster, the facilities, like Stats Matt said, the resources that they put into their program. The Colts are learning about these candidates, but the candidates are learning about the Colts, and they're kind of coming up with that plan of, if we did hire you as a head coach, what would you be able to do on the field? But then what's your vision for this team off the field and stuff behind the scenes that the fans don't really think about. So that's a really good point. Moving along to the next point here, and it's the big one that a lot of you guys have been talking about: the Colts blocking Gus Bradley from interviewing for other defensive coordinator jobs or leaving. And I want to touch on this because it's not as big of a deal as it might seem. And let me explain. Gus Bradley is still under contract with the Indianapolis Colts as their defensive coordinator. And many times when there is a defensive coordinator that's still under contract, or an offensive coordinator that's under contract, when you're interviewing these types for a head coaching position, the head coach will, once they are hired, then they can make an assessment of the staff, and that way the staff is in place like this. There might be a few of the candidates that really like Gus Bradley and want to keep him on the staff. Maybe the Colts are very happy with this defense and want to see it kind of progress, and so they're saying, hey, we really like Gus Bradley and we would hope that you would want to too, but ultimately it's going to be the coach's decision. So it's really not that big of a deal. As Stats Matt says, Evera was blocked until Sean Payton was hired. It's a normal process in the NFL for these types of things to happen.
Well, and you're hoping that with the Colts, I think that the best idea is to, this is just an opinion, of course, but is to, hopefully, if you're the next candidate, you look at the defense and you're like, look, that defense was the thing. That was it. That was pretty much what held the team to its measly 4 victories and close losses. It was that defense that did it all. So, you're thinking, you got a lot of young guys. Shaquille Leonard's coming back, probably going to lose Okereke, but you got Zaire Franklin, you got EJ Speed. It just makes sense, honestly, for a lot of whoever gets hired as head coach to keep Gus Bradley. But yeah, like you said, this is, and kind of like Stats Matt even said, again, the third host of the show, great little tidbit there. Evero was blocked as well, and now he's with the Panthers. So, I mean, that's just how things go until they get a candidate.
Nomadic Brian saying, would be curious to see what Gus can do in year 2 with that defense. The defense was stable, and that's something too. I don't really think necessarily Gus Bradley has a huge desire to leave Indianapolis, based off his comments for at the end of the season. Gus Bradley said, it doesn't matter who's the head coach. If they want to keep me, I would love to be here in Indy and continue to build off of what we were able to do in this first year in this defense. So I think Gus Bradley's completely content with doing that. And as Stats Matt says here, the best defensive line stats in years was under Gus Bradley. And I'm sure the same goes for Bubba Ventrone, as far as the Colts would like to hang on to Bubba as well. Matthew Bright asks, the third interview should be build me your staff and who would you draft? ? I think they've probably already gone over all that within those 12-hour interviews. That's why I'm not sure what a third interview exactly would look like, a third round, because those 12-hour interviews are long, and I just don't really necessarily see what else could be, what else could need to be discussed in that. But we'll have to see if the Colts decide to bring guys back. Scotty Montgomery. We'll move on to the next point. Scotty Montgomery, who was the running backs coach for the Indianapolis Colts the past few years, is moving on to be the assistant head coach, as well as the running back coach for the Detroit Lions. Kind of takes over the role that Deuce Staley had there in Detroit. Deuce Staley is now the offensive coordinator with the Carolina Panthers and Frank Reich down there. Scotty Montgomery, I think he deserves the promotion. He very well respected in the room. It's done wonders with that Colts running game. Obviously, he's got Jonathan Taylor, Naheem Hines, Zach Moss have all been in there, Deion Jackson, Jordan Wilkins at points. He's done well with all of those running backs, and I think this is well deserved. I think he could possibly be one of those next assistant head coach to go to an offensive coordinator, maybe get his shot as a head coach down the line.
Well, let's talk about real quick the one of the only maybe consistently halfway decent performance came from the running backs, and you saw Zach Moss really show some serious grit with Montgomery, teaching him, coaching him with the new offense that he was a part of after that Naeem Hines Bills trade and everything. But also, let's talk about how Frank Reich is putting together one heck of a staff right now in Carolina, and now you got Dan Campbell adding a great running backs coach. Fantastic assistant head coach with Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator still. Boy, look out for Scotty Montgomery to really put those running backs even more on point than what they were before. You're going to see a lot of touchdowns from Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift. I'll tell you that.
Detroit Lions have a lot of really good coaches. They really
Scary.
do. It's very solid staff. I love what Dan Campbell is building up there. And then the last point we have tonight is talking about, as Wyatt Law, who our loyal listener who has been all over this, the terms of the Naheem Hines trade. We heard it was going to be a conditional 5th or a 6th round pick. Turns out that it will be a 5th round pick for the Indianapolis Colts. Whitelaw said that he has already reached out to Tankathon for them to get that updated on there. So that good for Wyatt. Thanks for being on top of that. But honestly, now looking back at that trade, how the Colts got Zach Moss and a 5th round pick for Naheem Hines, that's a damn good haul in my opinion for getting a running back who wasn't maybe used to what he was capable of, wasn't used the proper way in Indianapolis, and he was. The Colts gave him that extension to make him one of the higher paid running backs in the league. So I think the Colts made out very well in this trade.
Well, and the Bills are now going to get a full offseason with Hines. Everyone's been saying, oh, well, we won the trade. Well, just let's hold on a second. Wait till Hines gets an entire offseason with that offense, and then we can talk about that. But I'll tell you right now, if you're talking about the first year, Zach Moss gives you pass down ability with brute force running ability. I mean, I think Andrew actually said this. I'll give him the credit for this. He said, it's different now because on 3rd down, you knew the Colts were going to pass if Hines was in there. You just knew it. 3rd and 2, Zach Moss, he might just run you over and get the 3 yards. So that would never happen with Hines. I think it's a great addition, and whoever's going to coach this team, man, they're going to have a couple of great running backs to work with, especially with a rookie quarterback.
As Whitelaw says that Ballard fleeced Buffalo. I wouldn't say fleeced because Buffalo still
did a
made
good
it.
Job, yeah.
Made it to the playoffs, but I do like the trade. I really do. And I think Zach Moss ended the year very strong. He definitely showed that he could be that number 2 back in Indianapolis. Wouldn't be surprised if the Colts do maybe take a flyer a late day 3 on an athletic, real speedster running back who's maybe good in the passing game. I think Deion Jackson might be able to do that, but it's always good to have competition there. But hey, that is our episode for tonight. Thank you guys all so much for joining. It was a really fun episode. Drake and I had a lot of fun discussing these head coaching candidates. Matthew, Whitelaw Stats, Matt, Quentin, Nomadic Brian, Logan. I saw Victor in there, Rich, Steve, all of you guys just fantastic tonight. And please go ahead, and if you haven't already, I'm gonna keep saying it until we get to at least 1K, and then hey, maybe I'll shave my head. But go ahead and follow us on all the things. Go ahead and like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Go ahead and follow Colts on FN on Twitter. Go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell so you know whenever Drake and I are going live, because hey, like I said, this head coaching search will end eventually, and it's probably going to end soon. So
yeah.
But before we get out of here, Drake, what are some of the things that you are working on? I know you've been writing away on for the site. What can people find on horseshoehuddle.com for you?
I've been writing a lot of stuff, but the one that I just wrote is a situation where should the Colts consider trading Michael Pittman Jr. in the offseason? And it has, I've seen a lot of discussions. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it's interesting, very interesting. And then I've got to have a piece up about Brian Callahan, and I talked about him a lot tonight, obviously. But Brian Callahan and what gives him a leg up in the competition here. So go ahead and go follow Drake at D Walster Drake. Go ahead and follow me at Andrew Moore NFL. I see a lot of you guys in the comments saying no for some reason. Could some people elaborate on that, what that might be? Let me take a look here. Just before we get out of here on Twitter, Stats Matt, what's going on? Do you know what people are saying no here? Because I'm looking here, and if someone can see what's going on, I don't know why people keep saying no to
I
the
don't.
episode ending,
I
because
don't want to get big eyes right
yeah,
now.
I
But
don't.
did we just get breaking news?
Unless Pittman trade, Schmidt said. Oh, okay.
Oh, they're saying no to the
My
Pittman trade.
goodness, you guys need to put some more context in that. You guys are making us think that did something break? Did something?
Do we need to keep going?
Breaking news happen on our show that we need to keep going? And then my mother, of course, saying no to don't shave your head. Listen, Mom, the Chrome Dome is happening whether you like it or not. It's just gonna happen. But until next time, like I said, go follow Drake at D Walster Drake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL. Thanks for ending the show on a funny note, guys. We will be back Wednesday night, not Thursday, because Thursday's my wife's birthday. So we're going to be celebrating that tonight. Wednesday night, we'll be back to talk more Colts football. And if maybe even a little bit sooner, if the Colts decide to hire a head coach. But until then, have a good one, and we'll see you soon.